It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Tuesday, March 31st, 2025, and y'all know what that means. Tomorrow is April Fool's Day. Don't do anything that ruins your relationships. And also, it's time to get nerdy, y'all. Welcome to episode number 336 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. I am Lam, also known as Mr. Nice Guy, and I'm joined by my comrade in gaming commentary, my bestie, my soon-to-be escort to the Midwest Gaming Classic, Mac Shin. Mac, how are you, sir?
Doing well. I'm excited to be your plus one to the Gaming Classic. You can show me the world of Midwest Gaming Classic Con. So excited. Granted, I hate flying, so I'm not excited for the long flight. But you know what? I'm excited. I'm excited for the train ride back. But I'm even more excited, travel aside, for the hang.
Me too. And I gotta say, you're actually my plus two, because another good friend of mine and friend of the show, who you will meet this weekend, the Real Kingler, formerly known as T. Ancom, is going to join us, and we're gonna hang out, and we're gonna do a lot of fun stuff, and I'm sure we'll talk about it after we do it on the next episode of the pod.
Yeah.
I gotta ask you, Mac, rather than what interesting has happened, what is it that you hate about flying? Because I feel like there's some solutions that maybe you didn't have in your life last time you flew, like a Steam Deck.
Where to start? Leg room, discomfort, TSA.
Okay, yeah.
The loading of the plane, like objectively, what you should do instead of loading first class first is you should load the people at the back of the plane first and like give first class like a lounge to hang out in right next to the terminals. If we were really talking about like absolute luxury and things like that, yeah, load the people at the back first so that they can get in, get their things, and we can. There's just so many things that are done backwards in air travel that I'm just like, there are easy solutions, things that would make travel objectively better. And I feel like every like 3 years or so, we see a picture of a dystopian future where they're trying to cram people in even more like sardines.
Oh, sure.
So so I just don't like air travel.
So you made it sound like they should put them in the back implies that you are flying first class, my friend.
No. Never. But when you get right down to it, like what about, if you're in first class, what about being on that plane is like pleasant or enjoyable?
Yeah, it's a ego thing. Like, oh, I get to get on first?
Sure.
Okay.
And I mean, maybe that's it, because I think if I was in first class, right, I would want to be the last ones on the plane. I'd want to be on that plane for the least amount of time. And let's say you got your, nose in the air and you don't like being around these pores because they've got those dividers in the planes, right?
I knew that phrase was coming.
Yeah, the pores. Then, why do you want to watch them come on the plane at the whole time? Ugh, yes, we cannot have these peasants around here, can we, Reginald?
Reginald.
None of us really want to be trapped in a flying metal tube for multiple hours with a bunch of different people. Like really. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, there's a lot of farting. There's a lot of I'll just take my shoes off and not have socks on, right? Because this is my world.
Yeah.
As a parent, I'm almost okay with the babies crying. Like, you can't control that.
Let's just note, Mr. Nice Guy, as a parent, is almost okay with the children crying. Under those circumstances, on the plane, no other circumstances.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not like the parents are trying to make the baby cry. They're just trying to get where they need to be and not do it in a road trip format. So I get it. There's a lot we could say about planes, but I'm sure a lot of comedians have already said the things that there are to say about planes. But Mac, I'll say this, not too much interesting happening other than my kids dominating at soccer.
Nice.
And a lot of laser tag going down. And I guess I should tell this funny story really, really quick in 30 seconds. So there's two laser tag places near where I live, and I play at both of them. One is more family friendly, one is more competitive. I often go to the more competitive one when I want to play with my adult friends, or with just a more competitive group, and I get destroyed because they're tracking your KD and all this. So I've gotten better where I'm getting like positive KD. Every once in a while I'll get a 2.0. They have a newcomer session for people who are under level 15. And I went to the newcomer session, and like just looking at the group of people who were in there, I was like, oh, I'm about to eat today. I'm about to get some kills today. Mac, I had a 2.74 KD. I had 115 kills. I ended up in third place out of 32 people during the session. And the whole time I was like in the upper level above their spawn, just shooting them as they were coming out. Like it was like that scene. Spawn camping, because they give you 3 seconds of invisibility once you respawn, so you could run with invincibility, but these people weren't doing that. It was like that scene in Elf where he has the snowballs and he's throwing them at the kids, and there's like one last kid trying to get away running, and he's like, nope, I'm a pro at this. I'm built different. And he throws the snowball and knocks the kid out. I was just doing that to people the whole match, and it was a glorious feeling.
Excellent.
And Mac, on that note, I say we do what we do best, and we hop right up in that gaming news, my friend. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Mr. Nice Guy, tell me, what is new in video gaming?
There is so much, and thank you everyone for tuning in to episode 336 of Two Nerds in a Pod, nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. Mac, the Minecraft movie is coming out shortly. And, you know, when movies come out, people do interviews. And Jack Black revealed one of his most played games in this article by Eddie Makic on GameSpot.com. Actor Jack Black is a big fan of video games, but what games specifically does he get immersed in? In an interview, the Minecraft movie star sang the praises of... And actually, you know what? Let's do this, Mac. Before I tell you what game it is, I want you to try to guess what game you think Jack Black would be into, because it's not what I would have guessed, but it is a very, very good game.
I'm going to say Red Dead Redemption 2.
Dude, did you already read the freaking article?
No. I was just thinking in my head, I'm like, Jack Black's a very funny guy, right? Red Dead Redemption 2, I don't know, just came to mind.
You are lying. You are lying, sir.
I swear to you,
dude,
I have not read it.
I have known you for like 15 years. You somehow read this or knew. There's no way.
Scout's
I can even
honor.
see it in your face right now.
I have not. I swear to you, dude. I did not read anything about it. Subliminally, at best. But like, editor's note. What I didn't remember at that moment in time was that in his 2003 song Video Games, Jack Black speaks glowingly about Red Dead Redemption 2. And while I had completely forgotten that, it just felt right. You know what I mean? This has been an editor's note. Also, you started saying on the first syllable.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did. The recording will exonerate me, but yeah, I made the educated guess.
Okay.
But I have.
Well, dude, it could have been a lot of different things. There's a lot of games that start with R, and right now, off the top of the dome, trying to improvise, I can only think of Red Dead Redemption.
Same.
The first one, other than Red Dead Redemption 2. So anyway, he says his favorite game, Red Dead Redemption 2. Rockstar's 2018 acclaimed game, saying he played for the title for hundreds of hours during the pandemic. Wow. Quote, it was over pandemic times. I played Red Dead Redemption 2, and I lived in it, he told Comic Book, the webpage. It was not a game, it was a way of life. I got 400 hours clocked, and it was a lot of fun, and I don't regret any of it. It was so fun. It was so beautifully out there. It's an incredible universe they created. Mac, I would have guessed World of Warcraft. Just because a lot of these, like, you know, you think Henry Cavill, I know Dave Chappelle, a lot of these celebrities have, like, pretty beefy PCs. Not that you need a beefy PC for WoW, but a lot of them are more PC gamers. So that's what I would have guessed for Jack Black. But Red Dead Redemption 2, curious, like, if there was a game that you were going to get lost in, and, you know, this is going to actually require you to think out of your comfort zone, because you're more, we know after 300 plus episodes, you're more into retro, you're more into the side-scrolling Metroidvania, you know, type of thing. But if there was a game you were going to immerse yourself in for 400 hours, what do you think it'd be? I know, tough question, right?
Yeah. I feel like for me, it would probably wind up being a game like Stardew Valley, or like one of those cozy type things. I've also been known to do to get down on a Civilization game or two. So I could imagine myself losing myself in Civ. What are we up to? 7 or some such now?
I have no idea. There's a lot of them.
But yeah, I could see a couple of modern games that I could drop that amount of hours into.
Okay. So for me, because I like multiplayer, and it doesn't always have to be competitive, one of the most influential games that ever graced my controller, or graced my console, which then in turn graced my hands in the controller, was Monster Hunter Tri on the Nintendo Switch. And games like that where there's co-op, but you're also kind of coordinating before you go into battle, really interest me. And so World of Warcraft is actually the game. Like, if I could go back and get in on that 15, 20 years ago when it started, I absolutely would. At $15 a month, no question. And I think that my wife is probably very grateful that I never got into that game. But it's something that's always intrigued me. I feel like it's too late to get into at this point.
Well, one thing that's kind of interesting is I think it was maybe a year and a half ago or so, they started doing that World of Warcraft Classic, where they started it back and then updated it, taking it through each iteration in a much faster clip. Maybe they'll do that again and start it over from the beginning. And I mean, I don't know if they would set it back to $15, but that would certainly be a fun way to get onboarded. Now we just need to carve out the time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, Mac, let's read a little bit about the Nintendo Switch 2, which is probably the hottest topic in the gaming world right now.
Hot topic.
One last question, though. I'm curious. Minecraft movie. Interesting, not interesting? Redbox rental, wait for it to be streaming. Just curious. As a Minecraft player yourself.
Maybe. It doesn't particularly interest me. However, I know that I'm going to be waiting for a train at the perfect time to catch a midnight movie. And so I think, and the Minecraft movie will be out. So I might actually go see the Minecraft movie pretty quick here. We'll see.
Well, let's read about the Switch 2 on IGN.com. Here is what Matt Kim writes. Ever since Nintendo officially revealed the Switch 2, all eyes have been on the upcoming April Direct. That's when we'll presumably get an official Switch 2 release date, price, and confirmed lineup of games. So the last thing I was expecting was for Nintendo to drop another Direct the week before then, packed with big names like Pokemon Legends ZA and Metroid Prime 4. But maybe given Nintendo's commitment to backwards compatibility, I shouldn't be too surprised. Prior to this week's Nintendo Direct, Nintendo was careful to temper expectations by declaring, quote, there will be no updates about the Nintendo Switch 2 during the presentation, unquote. Well, that's technically true. Switch 2 wasn't mentioned apart from the reminder about the upcoming Direct and the new virtual game card sharing system. It's not a huge leap to say that everything we saw this week will be playable on the Switch 2, even if it's officially these games are coming to the original Switch. It's a win-win for everyone involved. Those switching with the OG Switch will still have plenty to be excited about as the console enters its 8th year, and anyone upgrading to Switch 2 can do so safe in the knowledge that it will have an extensive back catalog of games right from the get-go. Mac, my question for you is this, because Nintendo has always done this. We think about Twilight Princess being available on both consoles, right? The old one and the new one. I think it was the GameCube and the Wii, if I remember correctly. We think about Breath of the Wild being available on, now I'm forgetting consoles, being available on the Switch and also on the Wii, I think, or on the Wii U.
Yeah.
Bottom line, they often overlap. What do you think about this? Is it obviously it's a smart business move to have an install base where you can sell your game, but often I feel that gamers are getting a watered down experience. Should Nintendo keep doing this, or should they just say hard line in the sand? You got to get that new console to get the new game.
Well, look, if I believed that the new console was so over and beyond much better than the one that predated it, if the hardware was so different, if the experience was so fundamentally different, then I would say sure. Like, if we wanted to talk about the Wii U, didn't really quite have the same motion control emphasis as the original Wii. I think
Right.
great example of a situation where it's just like, you know what, maybe backwards compatibility can't really be a thing for these. However, for the most part, I feel like we haven't had that issue for a while with Nintendo, or I would argue most other consoles, that like the tech is so different, the fundamentals are so different that we can't have backwards compatibility. So like, I don't think it's a watered down experience, but like, I'm not going to begrudge if it truly is something different. Like when we had that situation with the Wii, or with the Nintendo Wii.
Well, yeah, like even going from the GameCube to the Wii, I believe that was Twilight Princess. And I'm 99% sure it was. Like, you could obviously do motion controls with your sword.
Yeah.
And so people were missing out. Now, granted, that was their choice to purchase the previous version, and that's fine. But I don't know. Something about, and I'm not a gatekeeper. Don't misinterpret, listeners, that I think that someone who can't afford or can't get access to the new console shouldn't be able to enjoy the experience.
Yes, he doesn't look down upon the pores.
I don't look down upon the pores. I sit back in the business class like everybody else. But here's what I think. Or excuse me, not business class, coach, like everybody else. There's something exciting about getting a new console and knowing that I paid X amount of dollars for this, and now I am able to play this game that I was not able to play on my previous console. It's not about anyone else. It's simply about me. Hey, kids, I went out and I pre-ordered this, and I got it, and now we're able to play this new Mario Kart. Now, speaking of that, Mac, launch titles for a Switch 2. I feel like over the past several generations, we've had a Zelda launch title. Twilight Princess, Breath of the Wild, et cetera, et cetera. That's obviously not going to happen here. What launch titles would you like to see on a Switch?
Is Metroid Prime 4 slated to be a launch title, or do we know?
We don't know, but we just saw a trailer for it. So we don't know if it's a launch title or if it'll come later.
I would be surprised if it wasn't a launch title, but, you know, who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, gosh, I really don't know. I would love to see another Zelda game, but, like, art takes time, and Nintendo's pretty good about keeping things buttoned down until they're ready to show something off. So I don't know what could possibly be in the running, but like a Pokemon thing, a Metroid thing, and then probably a smattering, maybe one or two new IPs on the launch.
I agree with you. I think as long as that new Mario Kart 9 is a launch title, I think they're golden. But I have one last question for you on this topic, because Nintendo has done something, and I don't know that they've historically done this as much. Correct me in the chat, shoot me an email if I'm wrong, of showing a ton of different games that people are excited for, but not saying if they are necessarily going to be launch titles. They showed Pokemon, they showed Metroid, they've showed Mario Kart, they've shown some other indie stuff. What do you think about that strategy of saying, hey, all this stuff is coming, but we don't know if it's a launch title? Like, would that make you, if you were the type to buy a console, buy it, knowing that it's coming?
You know, it would. Especially if I knew I would be getting my new game in my favorite series on the Switch 2 instead of the Switch 1. It would definitely push me that direction. Tack on the notorious difficulties in getting your hands on Switch hardware, as well as everything else. I think if I knew something was coming out, it would compel me to head that way. You know what I mean?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting about it is we've always known that stuff is coming. Right? Like, Nintendo doesn't really switch up the formula too much. We know that there's going to be a Zelda. We know there's going to be a new Mario at some point. We know there will be a Pokemon. I just think it's interesting that this time they've chosen to show trailers for these things in advance of the release. Now, if it's 2 years out, that would be frustrating. I have to believe, like you said, that Metroid Prime 4 is going to be a launch window title, if not on launch day, because they first showed Metroid Prime 4 like several years ago. So at least the image of it. So
Yeah.
I would hope that we see that very shortly.
Same.
Mac, there's a lot to talk. Go ahead.
Before we leave the talk about Nintendo, I actually had heard a little bit about the virtual game cards.
Yeah.
Completely independently. Were you going to talk more about that?
No, go for it, dude, because really I was going to wrap up.
Okay, I've got questions. Virtual game cards, right? As it stands, your digital library of games that you've bought, and I ask because, like, you know, I don't have a Switch, much less 2 Switch consoles like I know you have. But so you buy a digital game, and how do you play it / your kids play it? How many copies do you need? How does that all work out?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The reason we have 2 Switches is in part because the one that I bought launch day 2017 is beat to heck. It's just like barely living on a thread. But to answer your question, if I remember, you can only really be logged into one profile at a time.
Okay.
And so if I have Hollow Knight on the Switch, which I do, I can't be playing it on both Switches at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be playing it on one or the other. And so we actually have multiple profiles set up. I believe that Hollow Knight is tied to those profiles, if I remember correctly. So you can't be playing the games that are digital on multiple places at the same time.
So it would not work for you to be playing your copy of Hollow Knight on one of your Switches on your profile and one of your kids to be playing Hollow Knight on the other Switch on their profile.
I believe that's correct,
Okay.
but I'll have to double check. But I believe that's right.
You know better than me, so I mean, what you say goes. So I don't know this, but all right. So the ocean behind their digital lending, their virtual game cards, right, is that they're going to give people a sort of ability to lend out the game within their family group. And I think it's limited to just family groups, but also to lend out the title to other, I guess, Nintendo Switches that are on the same profile as well, that have the same master profile or whatever that's called. And then if you loan it out to somebody in like your family group, it comes back to you automatically after 2 weeks and so on. So it seems like an interesting solution to a problem that digital copies kind of inherently have. I'm not sure if I know if I feel like I don't know whether it's a step forward or a step backward or a step to the side, but it feels like a progress. It feels like a good thing. This virtual lending. Of course, at the same time, I'm always very skeptical about, like, Nintendo has long tried to tank the secondary market for games whenever it can try to do so legally or pseudo-legally. So, like, I always see Nintendo's actions in the lens of, I mean, how are they doing this to lock down the IP even more? To prevent piracy. Mac is doing big old air quotes. But yeah, so I don't know, but it certainly seems kind of like a good thing. What's your take as the Switch owner?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I mean, it's very similar to what Steam does with the family sharing, right? I guess the one counterpoint to it being good is that it could potentially result in devs not getting paid twice on a game that otherwise would have sold 2 copies, right? Because you lended out this game to your friend and they beat it in 2 weeks and then they returned it to GameStop, hypothetically, right? Or like some people used to do. So I guess that's the one downside. On the other side, it could actually result in more sales because if you have a digital copy of a Mario Kart and someone tries it out in 2 weeks, there's a lot more than just 2 weeks of content in that game. And so it could result in someone going and buying Mario Kart. That's a bad example because people know Mario Kart and what it is. But for a lesser known game, it could result in an extra sale after they've quote unquote tried that demo of you loaning it to them. So I think this is a positive. I think it's a step forward.
I think we should be careful because Nintendo's stated position in court is that being able to see somebody play a game before they buy it does damage them. That was the suit against the guy who live streamed the Zelda
before
Oracle
release.
Wisdom. before release. That it damaged them, and they got fewer sales as a result of it, and that was some of the damages that they were coming after the streamer for. So I just can't nail
Mac
Nintendo down.
is wildly taking things out of context. Because
No,
we're talking about before release.
That was their stated position. So I mean, I can't imagine how it would hurt your sales to be able to see how gameplay was before release, because they said it hurt sales, and how being able to essentially demo it on somebody else's lending account wouldn't also therefore necessarily hurt sales.
I don't know. I think that what you're doing is disingenuous. This argument that you're making.
I think their arguments in court are insanely disingenuous. I'm doing nothing worse than they.
It's all good. Well, hey, it's time to move on from news.
Sure.
That's been our news for the week.
Well, so let's turn to history. On the subject of Legend of Zeldas, back in 2003, Wind Waker for the GameCube. Fantastic. Excellent title. It's the only title that I've only experienced by watching somebody else play it via emulation. Almost everything else I have either played personally or I've seen played on the original hardware. Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, these things I got a chance to play myself. But Wind Waker is one that I never had anybody in my orbit who had a GameCube. And who had Wind Waker, so it was just experiencing it through emulation. But yeah, Wind Waker. I don't know, Mr. Nice Guy, was Wind Waker one of the ones that you enjoyed?
Huge fan, and it's interesting. I remember I had a GameCube in college in my dorm. In my dorm, and that was not one of the games that I had. But later on, I did pick up a copy of Wind Waker, and I loved it. Great Zelda game. And at first, I was really turned off by the cell shading graphics, but they grow on you. And I actually think they should make another Zelda in that style.
Yeah, that cartoony feel grows on you for sure. Well, let's see. A couple of other things. In 1998, we had the release on PC of Starcraft. But let's go back a little bit, right? Because it's December 1995, Mr. Nice Guy, and Blizzard launches Warcraft 2, right? An insane hit. Almost immediately after its launch, though, they started working on Starcraft, which was going to be Warcraft 2, more or less, but in space. So 6 months later, at E3 1996, so that's, June 96, Blizzard shows off their complete, fully playable version of StarCraft. But people didn't really care much for it at E3, saying that it played exactly like Warcraft 2, which is no surprise because it was 100% the same game engine running StarCraft as was for Warcraft 2. In essence, they had done, they had basically made a new DLC that gave you orcs in space, and that's not what people wanted. So back to the drawing board it went, and after a couple of years of development, of making a new engine, making new assets, making kind of new everything, instead of it being a fresh coat of paint on Warcraft 2, StarCraft was its own thing, released in March of 1998, and the RTS world would kind of never be the same. And it's kind of wild to think how much time elapsed between StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2, and how, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that StarCraft 1 still has the bigger of the esports following than StarCraft 2.
I have no idea. I just am always blown away by how many really, really good PC games there are that continue to maintain a community years and years and years and decades later. It's wild to me.
For sure. Well, howdy AR. But yeah, no, so that was StarCraft. One other thing, Mr. Nice Guy, and you never had a PSP, did you?
I did have a PSP, and I still do have a PSP.
Dude, okay. So 2005, the launch of the PSP, the first PlayStation handheld. Like, Nintendo had dominated the market for ever since the original Game Boy. Now, granted, we did get a Game Gear, a Sega Game Gear, but like, you know, that couldn't go the distance, even if it had color. I mean, I want to say that thing ran off of like eight
batteries
AAAs.
or something.
Yeah. Or double A's. It was nonsense. But one of the things that I remember quite a bit from the PSP was how, like, the memory formats, like the memory cards,
ridiculous.
Ridiculous. Well, I mean, and that was it. When we started to get like digital cameras in the late 90s, early 2000s, every single company had their own thing. You know, Fujifilm had their own memory card. Nikon had their own. And Compact Flash, you know, came out in the mid 90s. Everybody had their own format, and of course Sony had the memory stick, which they used in the PSP. And I just felt like as everybody was coalescing around micro SD or SD cards rather, that we still had at the end of it, we still had the SD and the memory stick for the PSP. Anyway, amazing device when hacked, like for emulation. Absolutely incredible.
You know what's funny about the PSP was the game format.
Yeah, those UMDs.
The UMDs, dude.
Yeah.
And you know what was crazy about it? So even now on the on the Game Boy Advance, they had some game cartridges that were like episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants or episodes of Pokemon or whatever.
Yeah.
And the UMD did the same thing. They literally had UMD movies.
Yes.
And so I remember I bought my PSP and it came with a copy of Hitch. With Will Smith.
On UMD, the way it was meant to be experienced.
And when you think about it, like, why would you ever want to watch a movie like that? But I did, and it was awesome. So
amazing. Yeah, no, it's weird and wild, but I mean, like, you know, it was new. It was exciting. Where else were you going to watch a full Sony movie unless you had your PSP and your UMDs?
Right?
Yeah. Well, that's what I had for history this week. March was a wild month. And PSPs, I never had one myself, but by goodness if I don't appreciate what it did for those of us who couldn't watch Hitch any other way. That's been history for me.
Well, Mac, we got a philosophical discussion that we have to have. And I haven't been looking at the chat, so shout out to people who are here in the chat. Appreciate you being here, hanging out. Love you. But Mac, you had a PSP as well. Someone in the chat. Let us know what games you had for the PSP, because I'm super curious. Back to the topic of the week, Mac, which is this next segment where we talk about something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it. This is on Kotaku.com, and it goes back to the concept of when someone writes a story, should they allow that story to stand alone, or should they be willing to answer fans' questions about the morality, about the intent, or about the outcome? And so this is on Kotaku.com, written by Kenneth Shepard. Here is what Kenneth writes. We are 2 weeks away from the premiere of The Last of Us second season. The HBO live-action adaptation will be based on The Last of Us Part 2, and anyone who's played it knows it builds heavily off the first game's ending. As such, showrunners Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann are doing promotional interviews for the new season, and we were naturally asked by IGN about the moral conundrum presented at the end of the game. Now, Mac, I know you have not played The Last of Us, but you may know that at the end of the game, well, let's just continue reading. I see you nodding. And y'all, I think it's bizarre that someone who led two of my favorite games of all time manages to make them less interesting every time he weighs in on their character's actions, is what the author says. He goes on to say, and I almost want to summarize this, because just so people know, here's what happens at the end of The Last of Us.
Spoilers. Jump ahead if you don't.
Spoiler if you haven't played this game from a long time ago.
At this point in time, yeah, what is it? It's over a decade now? This is on you.
Yeah.
This is on you, not us, to stop it from spoiling.
If you haven't played the game or watched season 1 of the show, so basically Joel has taken Ellie to the Fireflies and finds out that they are going to put her under, and because she is immune to this zombie disease, they're going to use her blood and harvest her organs and whatnot to find a cure. And so Joel goes on what some might refer to as a rampage, kills everyone in the facility, rescues Ellie, and takes her out. And then at the end of the game, you know, she's awake and they're off like on kind of like a sunset in a beautiful setting. And I can't remember how she phrases the question, but she basically says, Joel, tell me the truth. Like, were the Fireflies really evil or something? And, like, was it really necessary for us to get out of there? And he says yes. He basically lies to her, and she's like, okay. And she doesn't know because she was under when he killed all these people and whatnot. And he basically lies to her and says that he did what he had to do. And I'm telling this terribly, but that's what happens. So basically, Mac, now the showrunners have been asked, you know, is what Joel did right? And they have said yes. So I guess I have two questions for you. As someone who maybe hasn't played through but maybe has seen footage of the game, do you think, number one, that what Joel did is right? And number two, yeah, I'm asking you the moral questions today. And number two, how do you feel? Here's the open-ended question. How do you feel about people weighing in on the story after the fact?
Weighing in on story after the fact. Okay, look, I love weighing in on a story after the fact. I love watching a movie and chatting about it. Sometimes I love taking a good friend to a movie that I have already seen so that we can chat about it afterward and such.
You're purposely misinterpreting the question.
How
do you feel about the people who wrote the story, who made the story, weighing in after the fact? I love discussion. But I'm more curious, how do you feel about Neil Druckmann, Craig Mazin, all of these people weighing in on the story after, well, maybe more just Neil Druckmann. How do you feel about him weighing in on the story after the fact, as opposed to leaving it open-ended for interpretation?
I'm reminded of a story. I believe it happened at like UC Berkeley or something like that, where what's his name? He wrote Fahrenheit 451. Is that Bradbury?
I forget the name, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. Anyway, the sci-fi author, you know, he shows up. He's talking to a group of college students, and he tells them what is pretty obvious. But you know, I can see you reading it another way. But like, it's pretty heavy-handed that the point of Fahrenheit 451 isn't censorship, but it's about, like, you know, the complacency and the you know, like how the screens are going to do y'all in and take away your critical thinking skills and such. How the technology, you know, don't surrender to the technology. That's what he's going for. But everybody, you know, gives, oh, it's about censorship. No, it wasn't about censorship. It was about, you know, it was about the technology. Technology bad. And so the story goes that the students are arguing with him, the author, about what the point of the book that he wrote was.
That's hilarious.
I think this is a function of the author's intent behind something being one thing, and then the fact that we will always read whatever we want into the story, no matter what the intent was, even if we have the author right there telling us, yes, it was a moral thing, yes, it was a good thing, no, it was a bad thing, anything like that. So as humans, we're just too stubborn to let the person who wrote the story tell us what it means. And so it doesn't bug me so much because I know we're going to find our own meaning or what it means to us, and that's going to be the most important thing to us forever. So doesn't bother me so much. I'm sure that there are differences of opinion. If you want to, I'd love to hear your take on it, but I also don't want to neglect answering the big one about my take on Joel's thing.
Yeah, so I'll tell you my thoughts on people weighing in. So I would prefer that they do not.
Mm-hmm. Just so it can be that mystery?
Just so it can be that mystery. And it honestly, like, opens the door for a lot of great discussion. But once you know what their intent was, and what their vision is, it's really hard to argue with it, right? Like you said, it's silly for those, or at least I'm interpreting it's silly for those students to argue with the author about the author's book. I'll give this example real quick.
Yeah, you
One
wait
of my
until
favorite...
Bradbury leaves the room, and then you say, man, that guy was on something, right, guys? Yeah, we all know it's about censorship. I don't know where they found this guy.
Great book, but doesn't know what he was writing about. So, Inception, one of my favorite movies of all time. And I'm not going to summarize the movie, but you can go watch it. You can see what it's about. At the end of Inception, for those who have seen it, there's this moment where he spins the top to determine if he is in the real world or in the dream world. and it keeps spinning and spinning and spinning, and it kind of starts to falter. And we know that if it falls over, that it means one thing. If it keeps spinning, it means another. And then the screen cuts to black, and we are never told if he's in the real world or if he's in the dream world at the end of the movie. And that's a mystery that I am okay with remaining a mystery, because it allows for a lot of interpretation and a lot of questions and rewatches of the movie, and enjoyment. And so, you know, similar to when Mass Effect 3 had an ending that gamers were not happy about and they came and chose to change the ending, I don't think that authors should have an obligation to appease their audience.
Agreed.
Much like a comedian shouldn't pander, the author should just put their work out there and let it stand. You don't have to justify yourself to anyone. Just let it lie. And I wish that they would have done that here.
I will say I do desperately want to tell you my thoughts on the ending of Inception, but that can be for a later time. I want to answer your first question.
Okay.
Lam, I love taking your questions always in reverse order. So your first question, was it the right decision? No,
Yeah.
because if I learned anything from Spock sacrificing himself in Wrath of Khan,
Spoilers.
the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one or the few. And yeah, so I mean, is it a good thing? No, but at the same time, stopping the clickers, stopping the zombie apocalypse, and all it takes is the sacrifice of one person. Basically, you needed to ask Ellie.
Right.
And get her to agree to it. But, like, you know.
Hey, Ellie, wake up. You okay with me killing all these people?
No.
Yes?
No.
Okay,
I'm
let's
talking
do
about, are you okay with us killing you to save the world?
Got it.
That's
got
the
it.
question had to be Ellie's thing. So, but I think he could have got her out of there without killing everybody. But then again, I wasn't there, man. I don't know.
Yeah. It's a weird situation because from Neil Druckmann's perspective, like, candidly, if he doesn't do it, we don't have a second game. You know what I
Sure.
mean? So, but I guess my thing is, it is tough, right? The needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few. But you also have to consider the fact that in saving Ellie, he's killing a lot of medical professionals during a time
In short supply.
in short supply during an apocalypse. So, like, that to me is wild. And if we think that he's wrong for that, or that he's right for that, then it means that Abby in game 2, when she goes and finds Joel and says, by the way, that doctor you killed was my dad, spoiler alert, you know, that would mean that she is in the wrong for that. So there's so many levels to this. I'll say this and then we can move on, or Mac, you can make other comments, or chat can make comments if they have them. When I watch The Walking Dead, you realize after a while that Rick is the villain. But the reason that I think so, but the reason that you continue to root for Rick and his team is because you've been on the journey with them.
Sunk costs.
And they go, yeah, and they go out. Well, not just that, but you've seen the pain and the challenges they've been through. And so when they start to go out and proactively kill people and justify it in the name of protecting themselves, you're like, yeah, because they went to freaking Terminus and people were trying to eat them, and they dealt with the governor, and they dealt with all these crazy people. And so with Joel, it's like we were on the journey with him the whole time, and so to us, he's the good guy, but ultimately he does a very, very villainous thing at the end. And then in the second game, Ellie does the exact same type of stuff. So they're not as heroic as we want them to be, but we've been on the journey with them. If someone makes a side game where we play from Abby's perspective from the very, very beginning, maybe we see her as the hero or the heroine. But because she comes in midway through the series, we see her as a bad person. And I think that that's why these things should be left alone by the authors. Let us interpret them on our own.
I've got nothing to add. That was beautiful.
Mic drop. That has been Topic of the Week.
All right. Well, now we turn to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off of the ground. This is going to be a short one because, full disclosure, Lom, I know that neither one of us is going to use this, but I still think it's a worthwhile thing. So, as you know, I'm kind of big in the retro scene. And one of the things that never really took off in the US was a specific type of analog connector called SCART, S-C-A-R-T. In the US, we opted for composite, which is the yellow, red, white. That standard started in the 50s. And then Component, that's the orange, blue, green, and the red, white, that started in the late 80s, but wound up being able to push analog HD. It could do up to 1080i. Now, SCART was invented in the 70s, and it got big, and for most retro consoles and things like that, is what you would have used in Europe and Japan and things like that. And so this Kickstarter project, the Recall Box RGB Dual 2, is meant to provide an expansion board called a hat to the Raspberry Pi 5 that lets you push your emulator from the Raspberry Pi to classic displays, like CRTs and such, through the SCART, Composite, or VGA. So if you are interested in one, it's 59 euros for one of these hats to just plug onto the Raspberry Pi and give you those video output options. There were some early bird sets that are gone now. The delivery is expected to be July of this year, and naturally there are several different configurations, but that's kind of the big one there. Now, they have done this before. They made basically the same thing back in 2022 that was for the Raspberry Pi 4, but with the Pi 5, the layout is different, the configuration is different, and they can take advantage of a few more tricks. So anyway, I don't have anything that uses SCART. I don't have anything that I need VGA for, or I've got my composite solutions in other ways. So this is not really aimed at us, especially because when you play the video, it's entirely in French, and there's not a single English word in the video. Now, they do have French and English down in the Kickstarter project, the description and such itself, so like that. But it's very clearly not for me. But at the same time, I do know enough people in the retro gaming scene that are overjoyed for things like this, because it's a good way to be able to push and still keep relevant your CRTs, even if you have to do emulation on it, and a good all-in-one thing to go ahead and put that onto your Raspberry Pi 5. So yeah, I don't think, Mr. Nicea, you've got that many CRT displays kicking around.
I really don't, and this actually brings up a question that I kind of wanted to talk about anyway, which is how many different ways do we need to play these old games? You know?
As many as possible. Still more. We need even more. Because the only way we make sure that we hang on to that history is if we keep it actively rolling, especially through emulation and things like that.
Well, I mean, I thought that we always were kind of proponents of physical. Like, I think ROMs should be out there, don't get me wrong. But I think that the real game preservation comes through the physical cartridge. Because at any given point, like, technically those ROMs could be taken down, and I don't know. It's a tough debate.
That's the reason why you got to have your own backup, your own stuff personally within your reach. But like the cartridges, eventually those things will fail.
They will.
Whether we're talking the internal batteries that go or any number of other things. And hopefully as we keep getting like ways to interface with old hardware that still works with new stuff, we can keep it relevant. And that's kind of how I see it. I see it like this is a way to keep some of this older tech still relevant.
And I get that, but it's keeping something relevant that is in some ways obsolete. Like, I get it. If you really just want to play on your CRT, that's great. But once again, I'd imagine that someone who really wants to play on their CRT probably is also more of a purist and probably wants to do it via original hardware. Now, I'm clearly wrong because this has a $11,000 or $10,800 goal and it's already at $83,000 with 32 days left. But to me, this is something that's too derivative of other ways that I have to play the game. To my left, you cannot see it, but Mac has been to my old house and seen it. I have a big arcade machine that I built from a gutted Golden Tee, and it's run on a Raspberry Pi, and I built the buttons, and I drilled the holes, and I did the lights, and it's awesome. And at Mac, it hasn't been used in probably since my Christmas party that we throw every year. Like, it gets used maybe a couple times a year because I have so many ways to play these games. And so I just don't know if I need another one.
Oh,
But
true.
clearly
Yeah,
there's an audience for this.
I'm not getting this. You're not getting this. It's clearly going to be big in France, and I mean, but especially because in the European Union, in the EU, and in Japan, SCART was a huge thing, and that's the big selling point for this guy is that SCART thing. But I do know that we have some European listeners. We have some people over there. Maybe they haven't seen it. If you're looking for something like this, the recall box might be what you're looking for. But over here in the US, we had component and composite. So S-Cart is kind of just a big miss for us. Still glad it's doing well, though.
Yeah, it's not for me. But, if it makes you happy, go for it. Not for me. I would say kick this. But as always, hope it succeeds.
Kickstart for me, but yes, we hope everything succeeds.
What's the delivery date on this? Just curious. Did you say that already?
It depended on if the early birds were going to be filled in June, but the sort of normal stuff's coming out in July. So not too frightfully long. But again, it's an updated version of a previous design. So,
This is why CRTs continue to be expensive. When you go to an old school game store and you see a CRTV, it's never 10 or 20 bucks like it should be. They're always pricey.
Well, as Ishmael points out, the CRTs do have phosphor that burns out eventually. And it is a cathode ray tube. That's what CRT stands for, that these things can definitely burn out. But there is something to be said, and, I'm not the most eloquent person to say it, but that some of the effects that you get in emulation that aren't on a CRT really don't capture the style of it. I don't know if you've ever seen those images side by side of what something looks like emulated versus what it looked like on our TV screen, and that inherent sort of blur that was common to the displays of the day. Anyway, getting far afield.
Well, Mac, let's dive right in. Next up is a segment we call Nerd Flex.
Woohoo! Ooh, that was good.
It was nice on key. I like it. A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the hosts. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. We're going to dive right into the test bank. If anyone has questions, you know how this works. Put them in the chat. Multiple choice, gaming related. Mac and I will use nothing but our noggins to try to answer them. Mac, the first question that comes up from our test bank of randomly generated questions is a special round question, which is very timely. And it's name 3 video game magazines. I feel like we can name more than 3, Mac.
Sure. Let's see. Nintendo Power?
PC Gamer? PC Gamer was...
Yeah?
Wait a minute. Yeah, PC Gamer has a magazine.
Game Informer?
Game Pro. And a Game Informer, very relevant because I didn't get time for this in news, but they are back under new ownership. So shout out to them. So that's 4 right there.
Yeah, that's 4. But Zap 64. There was a point in time where everybody had their own magazine back in the day.
Yeah, there was a lot. There's a lot. Well, that's 4. Let's see what's listed here. PC Gamer, Game Informer,
nice,
Nintendo Power, and Game
nice.
Pro. Dude, those are the exact ones that we mentioned.
We crushed it.
I wonder if those were the only 4.
Oh, no. So many more. So many more than that.
So here's another one, and interestingly enough, it's another special round. And it says, name a famous video game lake. Name a famous video game lake.
Lake Hylia?
Yeah, is that from Zelda?
Yeah.
That's the one I would have said.
There is a lake around which the Silent Hill game takes place.
Yeah, there's a lot of lakes in video games. I'm just having trouble thinking of them. I'm excited to flip this one and see the answer. Well, for the sake of time, let's just go with Lake Hialeah and see what else there is. Lake Hialeah is the first one.
Nice.
Omi Lake, Blue Hole Lake, and St. Mary Lake. And it doesn't say what games those are from.
St. Mary Lake, I think, is the one from Silent Hill. It sounds about right.
The Sonic question.
Ooh.
In which game does Sonic kiss the human princess Elise? I have no idea.
I'm going to say Sonic 06 because I know that there were humans in Sonic 06. And I don't know about any of the others.
Let's go with it. Sonic 06. Dude, Mac, you're a genius, man. It was Sonic the Hedgehog 06. Far enough from the originals, but not too present day that people would get upset about it. So, Nice. And hey, so we're pretty much 3 for 3. These were easier questions, but we all learned something new today, and that has been Red Flag.
All right. Well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese.
Legalese.
Okay, so I'm not a lawyer, neither in the United States nor the European Union, but I get the feeling that over the next few years that we'll have a lot of video game law coming out of the EU, which is actually kind of encouraging. So over in the EU, a recent change comes from the Consumer Protection Branch, specifically targeting virtual currencies in video games. And what they put out was a 7-point list that on first glance, you go ahead, Mr. Nice Guy, and you look at this list, and it's like, it reads like, hey, cool people don't do X, so you should do the opposite, which would look like this. But the intro paragraph is, this is a non-exhaustive list and does not preclude us from undertaking action at this. So it's like, it's very much written in a, hey, don't do this, you should do that. But at the top is just like, oh, FYI, we're coming for you. You're on notice if you're doing any of this, which is really interesting. So anyway, it's got these points, 7 points, and at every specific point, it does cite how doing X, Y, or Z, doing the things that they say you shouldn't do, breaks the law. Which reads as a very, 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 very like, hey, this is what we're going to prosecute you under if we catch you doing this, in spite of the very sort of, hey, you shouldn't do this type of thing. It's a very interesting thing that I'm sure doesn't translate so well, but like works real well in French or German or something like that. Anyway, point being, is that they have 7 points in this list, and a lot of them have like some of the overlap. Kind of like how you'll find that deceptive business practices and some types of tortious interference, like they sound very similar, and you see them like peanut butter and jelly in the same legal stuff, or assault and battery. Very rarely do you have one without the other, even though it's theoretically possible. So there is a lot of overlap. So in general, though, it does kind of give you 4 points, right? Number 1, information on the price of digital content or services is considered to be material information. So the real world price of a digital content or service must be clearly given. And because price is material information, obscuring what the real world price is will be considered material misleading information. So very much a just like, hey guys, you should do this, this is important. Also, you're on notice, this is coming for you. Another couple of things. Forcing you to buy more in-game currency than you need to buy an item is considered deliberate economic distortion. And the way I think about that is, you remember how hot dogs used to be sold in packs of 10, but the buns were always sold in packs of 8? It's very much that sort of a thing. It's just like, oh, you can only buy 10,000 gems, and you only need 8,000 to get this thing, so you gotta buy that. They're just like, hey, don't let us catch you doing that. Let's see. Another one that's quite interesting is that in the EU, you have a thing called the right of withdrawal. It's like a 14-day refund window on a purchase. And they say explicitly, even digital artwork is subject to the right of withdrawal, specifically referring to like character skins and such. And they're like, this is true even for video games. We aren't even going to consider exempting digital purchases unless you had people affirmatively agree before they bought a thing that they were waiving their right of withdrawal. And it's gotta be big old things. So don't let us catch you doing that on the shady side. Let's see. Another one that they put in there was that we're not going to allow you to limit consumers' statutory rights when making purchases. And that doesn't change just because it's virtual currency. Even if it has no real world value, their time is still valuable. And so you can't play shenanigans with people's rights, even if all you're playing around with is their time. And then the last one, and I'm going to quote this bad boy, and it gave a special message about targeting vulnerable populations at the end. Quote, The use of in-game virtual currencies psychologically disconnects the act of spending from real-world money for all players, which in turn leads to higher expenditure of real-world money. This is essentially a commercial practice that is likely to materially distort the economic behavior of consumers. This is especially true for vulnerable consumer demographics such as children. The reason for this is that children are more vulnerable than adults when it comes to advertisements and to other commercial practices. When it comes to virtual in-game currencies, children are more susceptible to the obscuring effects that often come with this type of practice. Given the widespread popularity of video games among children, any video game which is not exclusively intended for an adult audience should expect a significant part of its player base to be under the age of 18 years. This places a particular responsibility on game makers to avoid commercial practices that are likely to distort children's economic behavior by exploiting, for example, their lack of economic knowledge, experience, or natural credulity. And that's kind of how they close it down, which is really interesting. Which is quite interesting because when you get right down to it, what they're saying, what they're getting at there, is the last shot across the bow was, hey, unless you expressly make your video game for only people over 18 years, you're on notice that you need to expect that a good chunk of your players are children, and we're going to treat you like that in court. And I'm just like, dang. So on the one hand, people have been talking about this. Oh, this is about virtual currency and, how you have to, people who are reporting on this are just like, oh, hey, this is how you have to put the real world price in addition to the virtual currency on there for new things in the EU. It's just like, oh, guys, it is so much more than that. If you actually read it, it is telling you exactly how they are going to come after you, if and under what laws they're going to come after you, and what they expect you to assume from here on forward. This is a huge shot across the bow to the entire video gaming industry, particularly those people who engage in these practices for whatever reason. They're like, we're coming for you. This is exactly how we're doing it. And you're on notice that you must assume X, Y, and Z, especially that last one about children.
And that's, I think that's silly. The assumption that most of your player base is children is a wild assumption. And I didn't catch everything. Like, is that across all ratings of games or just based on games that have virtual currency? Because candidly, if it's an M-rated game...
Across all games, if the game that is not exclusively intended for adult audiences should expect a significant part of its player base to be under 18.
And that's very, very silly language. Like, exclusively, right? 100%. I always was taught as a test-taking skill, anytime an answer says always or never, there's a good chance that it's the wrong answer because there's a lot of exceptions to things. And so to say that a game is exclusively for a certain audience is just absurd, but it paints these people into a corner, which is probably what the intent was.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So I find that frustrating.
Oh, no, I don't. I think they've had it too good for too long. And I'm actually very much opposite here. I'm just like, yeah, no. These guys need to be on notice. No more wailing the children. This is the kind of stuff that I can get behind. People are like, "Oh, let's think of the children. Let's ban violent video games." Just like, no, that's not thinking of the children. Thinking of the children is being like, "Hey, think of the children. We are expressly going to come after you for X, Y, and Z if your game is not targeted primarily at adults because it's getting the children." Just like
Wu-Tang is for the children.
Wu-Tang
Mac is also for the children.
That's
Mac
right.
is also for the children. Cool. Anything else, Mac, on that?
Oh, gosh. I could go on for ages, but nothing that would interest anybody else. Them's the big things. I mean, arguably, that probably didn't interest most people. But still, I appreciate you. I appreciate you sticking with me through it. Nice guy.
It was interesting, dude. It was interesting to me.
Thanks.
I disagree with some of your points, but I think it was interesting. And that has been our show. But before we go, we have one last segment called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing. And maybe Mac will add what we plan to play too, because there's a few games on my radar that I'm thinking about getting into. If you're here live, you know what to do. Let us know in the chat what you've been watching and playing. Mac, over the past, what, has it been 2 weeks since we recorded last?
Yeah.
I was on spring break. I didn't even talk about that in the intro to the show. And we'll talk about that another time. But what have you been watching and playing, Mac?
Been watching a lot of Taskmaster, a lot of Dimension 20, but also I watched Zoolander 2 for the first time with a good friend.
Nice. I have not seen it.
It's hard to make a sequel, but I think of all the sequels, it definitely was among the better of the sequels. As for playing, though, I've been playing It Takes Two with a friend. I've also been playing D&D for those D&D classes and such, but I have gotten into Tunic, the video game. I have gotten deep into Tunic, and I am coming up on the end game here. So,
Nice.
so very much
on the Steam
forward.
Deck?
Yep, on the Steam Deck and on my PC. I've been popping back and forth depending upon whether somebody else is playing Baldur's Gate 3.
I get it. Shout out to Nerd Next Door.
How about you, man?
So I haven't played a lot, to be honest with you. We were on spring break this past week, which I forgot to talk about on the front end. So went down to St. Louis, texted out there, laser tag place, did a couple matches, but more importantly, saw the Arch, went to the zoo, pool time at the hotel, just like did a lot of fun stuff with the kids.
Nice.
So video games were not like my number one priority, but I did do a little retro game shopping while I was out there and picked up 3 games that I should mention. Number 1 for my Game Boy or for the Analog Pocket was Escape from Camp Deadly. Old Simpsons game, not a great game, but a very, very nostalgic game. I remember borrowing my friend's copy and like playing that in my room when I was supposed to be doing homework. So I picked that up for like $10. Also picked up a game called Sagaya, which is a side-scrolling shooter. It's an import, and apparently it's pretty hard to find. This particular store in St. Louis, outside St. Louis, I believe it was called Trade in Games, had it for like $30, and it's a much more expensive game than that. They had the Chinese version in stock. And he said, I didn't realize it was supposed to cost more, but I marked it this price, so it's yours. So I picked that up. And then the third game I picked up was Donkey Kong Land, a game that I got for Christmas as a kid, but lost my copy at some point over the past couple years. So that's what I've been playing. As far as watching, we watched Shang-Chi. We're still doing our Marvel watch through. And I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos of competitive tactical laser tag players trying to get my game up. Well, Mac, why don't you take us home, sir?
All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming out and being a part of the show, helping us make episode 336 what it was. Until we see you next time, of course, remember that you can always tune in, whether that, of course, is to the podcast audio after the fact, or showing up for the live show at twitch.tv/2nerdsinapod. And, trying to stump us with your nerdy trivia and such. We record most Mondays, 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Central. And until we see you next time, remember to be excellent to each other and keep it nerdy. Bye.
Deuces. Midwest Gaming Classic!
Woo!